بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. If you recall, the pagans, the idol worshippers, the enemies of Islam have decided to kill the Prophet ﷺ and assassinate him in his own house. Allah the Almighty would not leave His servant unprotected. Now is the time. Since few months, and the Prophet ﷺ was asked frequently by Abu Bakr, who was a wealthy man, "O Prophet of Allah, allow me to migrate to Medina." And the Prophet would say, wait, maybe Allah would send you a companion to go with you. And Abu Bakr had this inner feeling that he might be his companion. Till one day, when the plotting to assassinate him was finalized, the Prophet went to visit his close friend, Abu Bakr. And he was masking his face so that he would not be recognized. And he came at the time of noon, which is not his usual time to visit. And he asked Abu Bakr to clear the room because he had something to say in secret. And Abu Bakr said, "O Prophet of Allah, they are your family, who are my wife and children. They are your family." So the Prophet gave him the glad tiding. And he said, "Allah has granted me permission to migrate." Abu Bakr immediately said, "O Prophet of Allah, companionship, meaning allow me to be your companion." And the Prophet said, "Yes." He gave his approval. So they made a strategy to migrate and went back to his home, waiting for the nightfall. The enemies of Islam, the idol worshippers of Quraysh, spent their day plotting how to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ as they were in Dar al-Nadwa. And the Prophet's habit was ﷺ to sleep after Isha time till midnight, and then he would go at midnight to the masjid and pray night prayer. So that specific day, he instructed Ali to sleep in his bed and to cover himself with the green cloak of the Prophet ﷺ. So anyone who would look would think that it was the Prophet sleeping on his bed. And he told him that, "Do not be afraid, no harm would come to you. They would not kill you or injure you." Now, as they were monitoring and surrounding the house of the Prophet ﷺ, it was next to impossible for him to leave unnoticed. Yet again, he was protected by Allah, the Almighty Azza wa Jal. So he came from the house, taking a handful of the soil of al-batha, of the ground, and spreading it over their heads, repeating the ayah in the Quran in Surah Yasin. So we put in front of them a barrier and behind them a barrier, and covered them so that they would not be able to see. And he went between them, putting this soil on their heads, and they're not feeling it, and they're not seeing it. And they were blinded by this. The Prophet went immediately ﷺ to Abu Bakr's house. They left in the darkness of the night from a small door and went as planned. The plan was that the people of Quraysh, when they discovered that the Prophet ﷺ left, they would pursue him and send posses to abduct him and capture him, thinking that he's definitely heading to Medina, which is to the north of Mecca. So the Prophet's strategy was to go southwards of Mecca. And that was against all of their anticipated journey. People would have thought that they would go northbound and head north. So the Prophet went to Mount Thawr in the direction of Yemen and hid in the top cave of that mountain. It was a harsh terrain that was very difficult to climb with all these rocks. And the Prophet encountered a lot of difficulties because they didn't have specialized shoes to protect their feet. So the Prophet suffered, alayhi salatu till he went there, and they hid for 3 days and nights in that cave till the search was a bit down. Whereas Abu Bakr's daughter Asma would bring them food. Abu Bakr's son Abdullah would bring them news and tell them what the people of Mecca are saying and plotting. And Abu Bakr's freed slave, his freed slave Amr, would take the sheep and graze them and go back to Mecca so that the sheep would cover the traces of Asma, of Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr, so no one would track their footprints. And they, the Prophet and Abu Bakr, would be able to eat and consume some of the milk that Amr would give them. After these 3 days and nights, the Prophet ﷺ got his ride along with Abu Bakr and Amir ibn Fahira, along with a smart guide who would take them to Medina through different routes that the idol worshippers don't know of. And they set off. And he took them by the seashore, which was not usual for caravans to travel. And they traveled in secrecy till they reached Medina. The people of Medina heard of the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. So every morning they used to go to the southern area of Medina, anticipating the Prophet's arrival. Until one day, after long awaiting for the Prophet ﷺ, and it was hot and sunny, a Jew who came up on top of his castle saw the Prophet ﷺ coming from a distance. So he shouted his lungs out, "Oh, people of Arabs, here is your honor that you've been waiting for. He's coming." So all of the Muslims came out to meet the Prophet ﷺ. And they were so happy. At first, everyone greeted Abu Bakr, thinking that he was the Prophet ﷺ. Until Abu Bakr shaded the head of the Prophet ﷺ with his garment to protect him from the sun. Then they knew that he was the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Muslims came and everything was calm. There was tranquility, and Allah revealed, then indeed Allah is his protector, and Jibreel, and the righteous of the believers, and the angels, moreover, are his assistants. So the Prophet came into Medina alayhi salatu wasalam. And since then, Medina's name was changed from Yathrib, and this is the pagan name, to Medina. Nobody calls Medina as Yathrib, as this was the pre-Islamic era name, and this was for the pagans only, not for the Muslims. Every place the Prophet went, people gave takbir, shouting Allahu Akbar, praising Allah, glorifying Allah. And every house of the Ansar the Prophet passed next to, the people would hold the harness of the camel, trying to host the Prophet ﷺ, but the camel would not stop, and the Prophet said, "Leave it. This camel has been ordered." So the camel kept on walking until it came to the spot where the masjid is. And this spot, the moment the camel saw, it sat. Then it stood up again and walked for a while and came back to the same spot and sat. So the Prophet ﷺ said to them, "This is the spot that Allah ordered the camel to sit in." And he asked the companions, as we know that his maternal family are from Medina. So he asked, who among our kinship and relatives are the closest? So Abu Ayyub al-Ansari said, "My house, O Prophet of Allah." So the Prophet ﷺ went and was hosted by Abu Ayyub al-Ansari in his house. And that place where the camel reached and knelt down, this was the place where the Prophet ﷺ would build his masjid, as we will come to discuss inshaAllah in later classes. هذا والله أعلم ونسبة العلم إليه أسلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد.